All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland, and our guest, Lon Strickler. We're talking about Mothman and his book, Mothman Dynasty, Chicago's Winged Humanoids. Lon, do we have you there with us?
I'm here.
All right. Well, this has been a topic that we've been pretty excited about. Kara, my co-host here, we've had a lot of talks about cryptids, and this is easily her favorite cryptid. So
I'm kind of a Mothman evangelical. I want everyone to know about Mothman. So this is the first time we've actually had a guest who's actually an expert on the show, although we have talked about it a little before. So I'm pretty excited. Yeah.
So I'll start out asking you, why Mothman? What got you interested in Mothman as opposed to anything else?
Well, this kind of fell into my lap. We started getting reports. Well, the earliest reports came in 2011. August, September, and October, there were 3 separate reports in the southwest part of Chicago. People were describing this thing as a winged humanoid, and people were saying it kind of reminded them of the Mothman of Point Pleasant. Well,
and that was in the 50s, right?
I don't know if that's a fact, but, I mean, that's what people were saying. So what happened was, after that occurred, and I've been looking into this phenomena for a lot of years. I mean, I had an encounter in 1988 in Pennsylvania that may have well been a winged humanoid. But, this is just something it's part of what I do. I've been reporting cryptids and the paranormal for almost 40 years now. Been investigating, and, I've been writing a blog since 2005. Well, anyway, in 2017, there was a report of a winged humanoid in Oz Park in Chicago. This was reported on the MUFON CMS, and the witness was an attorney who was walking her dog at night. She came across this being that was standing in the park, about 7 foot tall, she said. It had structures that were on its back that were higher than, the top of its head. And when it turned to look at her, it had bright red eyes. The dog cowered behind her, and this thing just jettisoned into the air without unfurling its wings. And when it got to a certain apex, it took off and started screaming. That was the first recent sighting.
That's terrifying.
And since then, there have been several sightings throughout Chicago. I'd say we had about 55 sightings in Chicago and its suburbs in 2017. And at this point, we have been picking up sightings from southern Wisconsin, central and northern Indiana, and other parts of Illinois. And right now, we are up to 78 sightings.
Man, that is a lot of sightings. So in Chicago, is this something that's sort of like a buzz for the people in Chicago, or is this still on the outskirts of most people's thoughts?
Well, it was kind of, the press kind of laid off of it, and when Vice.com picked up the story of one of the sightings, that's when it started picking up some steam. At that point, I was getting ready to write a book about the sightings. So, I had talked to Vice earlier, and plus other news outlets in Chicago. And, of course, I did a lot of radio shows as well. So it started picking up. We were getting sightings. And, in fact, I was getting most of the sighting reports, though I had a team that was also getting reports. I have some investigators in the Chicago area. And, our cumulative sightings were the ones that we reported on. And, but God knows how many people saw something and never reported it.
Yeah.
Right, I see. So, it seems to me like of all the cryptids, you said you've been reporting on cryptids for years. It seems to me like Mothman is one that really sort of carries the most amount of supernatural connotations to it, because it seems just so odd. Everything else on the planet, we've all evolved in a way, and there's the arms and there's the tree, and we can see how things evolve. And so Bigfoot makes some sort of evolutionary sense. But Mothman, to me, it's like, it seems almost supernatural. What are your takes on that?
Well, there's no real indigenous rhyme or reason for this thing. The sightings in Point Pleasant in 66 and 67 were of a insectoid type winged humanoid that had wings like a moth, basically. Now there were some variations, but it had the red eyes, the small stunted head, but it seemed to be very aggressive. And there were approximately 30 sightings before the eventual Silver Bridge collapse just before Christmas in 67. And 46 people died as a result of that, of the bridge failure. And the Mothman was supposedly seen before the event, and it was kind of called the harbinger or a portent of doom, and was kind of blamed for the eventual disaster. Now, I don't really buy into that, and in fact, when these sightings in Chicago started, there were, of course, people asking about, well, is this a harbinger or some type? And of course, I can't answer that, but to be quite honest with you, back in when it got to around July and August of 2017, I was literally getting 20 to 25 phone calls each day and night from just regular citizens in the Chicago area that were worried that they were going to face some type of disaster. So I was really on my toes that 2 months.
I always thought with these Point Pleasant sightings that the connection of the harbinger and the catastrophe, I always thought it was like a little bit loose, and it was a little odd that people made this connection. It was kind of like, witch trial-y. It was a little too panicky to make the connection out of. I always thought it was a little bit weird that people would say, oh, we saw this thing and that's why the bridge fell. I don't know. It seems a little ready to burn Frankenstein or something,
Point Pleasant and the environment, Point Pleasant is a fairly small town. And when you get a disaster that killed 46 of the residents, people invariably got to blame it on something. And I guess it was kind of excuse as to what happened. And in fact, the official report eventually came out that there had been bolts that had been rusted, but it was basically that when these winged beings show up, it's supposed to be like a precursor to a disaster. Mm-hmm. And there have been other disasters where people said they have seen winged humanoids. Chernobyl was one. The Fukushima nuclear disaster, people said they were seeing these flying beings. So, I guess you can take it with a grain of salt. But, so far in Chicago, we really haven't seen any type of disasters and such that can be attributed to the sighting of these beings.
Yeah, well, that would explain why it moved to Chicago. Apparently it got a bad rap, because
didn't like the small town environment.
Right, it's like, I'm getting blamed. I tried to warn these people, and now they're getting all pissed. They want to kill me. Lon, we're coming up on break here, so let's plug your book for a second. And where can people find your book? A reminder to people, the book is called Mothman Dynasty, Chicago's Winged Humanoids. Where can people buy that?
No, they can get it on Amazon. All they got to do is search my name, Lon Strickler, and it'll come up.
Sounds good. All right. You are listening to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Lon Strickler. We're talking about Mothman. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Lon Strickler. We're talking about Mothman here. Lon, in the first segment there, you talked about one of the things that got you interested in this is you had your own experience in sighting, and that definitely piqued my interest. Can you tell me what your experience was?
Well, this happened in the fall of 1988. I had met up with an old friend that I had gone into Boy Scouts with when I was a kid. So we happened to run into each other, and he was actually a scoutmaster then. And he asked me about about something that was going on in the old Camp Conawago campground. And he was telling me that a lot of the kids and their troops and such were being run out of the woods near the campground because of these unknown screams. The kids were freaking out. They were packing up and leaving. So he said he and a friend were going up to the campground that next weekend. He asked if I wanted to tag along. So I said, sure. So the next weekend,
and you said,
we met up.
Lon, and you said unknown screams, so you all of a sudden were in? That seems terrifying.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to know what that was.
Yeah, all right.
So, horror movie character logic.
So we got to the camp, the camp, and then we met up and hiked into the woods, and we set up camp along the Conawago Creek. So the first night was pretty uneventful. We each of us had a tent. We had 3 tents, and though we did hear something walking around in the campsite, though I thought it was probably one of those guys getting up to use the latrine or such, so I didn't really know. But we mentioned it the next morning. So it was a nice day, so we got up and had breakfast and started hiking around the woods and such, and we were out most of the day. Pretty thick woods, too. That time of year is a lot of underbrush. So a lot of wildlife as well. So we got back to the campsite about 6 o'clock in the evening, and we started getting something to eat, sitting around the fire talking. We were talking about football. And, off and on, I would get up and stretch my legs and walk around. So about 11 o'clock, all of a sudden this loud scream came from the west, and it was coming in and out. I thought at first it was probably an owl or maybe an eagle, but I didn't know. So it screamed again, and this thing sounded like a child screaming. And it had gotten closer, then it kind of faded out again. So we got up and walked around the campsite. We didn't see anything. So we sat back down and started talking some more, trying to figure out what it was that we heard screaming. Well, anyway, I guess around 12:30, 1 o'clock, I got up again to stretch my legs, and I walked over by the trail along the creek. And I just had this sense that something was watching us. So I went back to the campfire, and I told those guys, why don't we get up and just walk along the trail a bit, see if we see anything out, So they said, yeah. So we got up, and, we didn't walk more than 50 foot away from the campsite. And to the right of us in the creek, and the creek was shallow at this time, and the moonlight was really, really good that night. We saw this being, this whatever, standing in the middle of the creek. It was dark, and it had these red eyes. And by the time we got the flashlights on this thing, it just whooshed up into the air. It jettisoned like a rocket. And a couple seconds later, we heard it screaming, and as it flew away from us and, faded out. So I guess we freaked out a bit. We got back to the campsite. My buddy, he didn't want to stay. He wanted to go up the administration building and spend the night.
I don't blame him.
So the other guy asked, and the other guy was pretty calm. He said, "Did you notice anything on its back?" Which I did, because it kind of looked like there were folded wings on its back. But, I never saw any wings unfurl. And, I said, yeah, I did notice it. And, of course, we all noticed the red eyes. So they went up, the other two guys went up to the administration building and spent the night up there. I wanted to see what was going on, so I stayed around the campsite. But, nothing else happened that night, so I really didn't get a look at it beyond that. Though, when I wrote about this about 20 years later on my blog, I got a comment from a guy who lived at Dick's Dam, which was upstream from the location. And he was telling me he's heard these screams for years. He never knew what it was. And not long after that, I guess about a month after, I got another email from a scout leader who told me, he said, we were at Camp Conewaga not long ago, and the boys in my troop came running back one early evening and swore up and down that there was a dragon, a 6-foot-tall dragon, standing in the trail, not far from where we were camped at. And they said it was, it looked like it had feathers and a tail, but they said it was a dragon. Of course he thought they were nuts, or they were just playing games with him. So he kind of dismissed it. He didn't even bother going up to look, see what was going on. Nothing else had happened the rest of the weekend for them. So, but when he saw what I had written, well, then he had second thoughts. He said, well, maybe they did see something. So anyway, the last sighting that we have had along the Conewaga Creek that I know of was about 3 years ago. And from the point along the Conewaga Creek at the campsite, then when it runs along and goes eastbound toward the Susquehanna River, is about a 20-mile stretch. I've had about 5 sightings over the years.
Really?
Reported to me.
Man, that is a lot. So, that kind of prompts my question. Of these 78 sightings that you're referring to in Chicago, how many of those do you think are credible?
That's just the ones I think are credible.
Oh, I see. Oh, wow.
Wow.
That is a lot of sightings.
I mean, there were several that we didn't even bother with. I mean, there weren't many. I tell you, the one thing about these sightings and the reports, and look, we got them from all over the city, all over the region, all races, creeds, everything. I mean, this is, they run the gamut as far as people that made reports. And some people are closer than others. Some had very close encounters. And, but people just didn't embellish on the story, which is unusual. Normally when you get somebody who'll call you or send a report in, and then when you talk to them, the second time, that they communicate with is most times there's some type of embellishment, or they say, well, I remember this that I forgot about, or something like that.
I see.
But
like
this thing left such a great impression on them that even when I tried to prod them to elaborate on their story, they wouldn't do it.
I see.
That's amazing.
So, that adds to the credibility if they're consistent and,
yeah. I mean, how much embellishing do you need to do if you've seen a 7-foot creature with red eyes and wings?
Yeah,
that sticks in your mind.
The sightings themselves, the early sightings were of a Mothman-like being. Then subsequently, we got 2 or 3 sightings that were described like an Owlman or a Lacusa. They were all 6 foot, 7 foot tall. Some had the red eyes. We had wingspans of anywhere from 10 to 12 foot. But I'd say 95% of the sightings since then have been the bat-like or gargoyle-like wings, which really isn't anything indicative of what people saw in Point Pleasant. But the Mothman moniker kind of stuck to people.
Right.
And, you'll see too many winged humanoid sightings around, especially in a major city like Chicago.
Yeah, and it's easy for people to fill in it's easy for people to fill in the blanks when they're looking in the dark.
Sure.
All right, you're listening to Lon Strickler. We're coming up on break time. We're talking about Mothman. So, come on back, and we got some more questions for him. Without asking you
the big question.
What you think it might, is it speculative and stuff like that, but, what are you speculating?
Personally, I believe it is flesh and blood. I believe there have been at least 3 of these beings in the Chicago area, maybe more. But I believe that is most likely a interdimensional being. It's something that's coming through from another reality, which is the same thing I believe the Mothman at Point Pleasant was. And, we've had these winged humanoid sightings worldwide, but those I have investigated in the United States and Canada, they all seem to be something that's fleeting, comes in and out, and is not indigenous, and then just doesn't live on our Earth plane. We have had 2 witnesses, one in Chicago and another in Rockford, Illinois, who stated to us that they saw this winged being literally disappear like it was going through a gateway.
That would explain the big time differences in the sightings, I guess.
Yeah, I guess, but there are a lot of variables as far as these sightings. Some of them were more localized, as opposed to some of the others. Then some, like you said, some of them were a great distance away of other sightings. So, that very well may be it, but I just don't think this thing resides on our Earth plane. And for whatever reason, why it's coming here, is it being summoned for some reason? It's all, like you said, it's all speculative. And, but, the team I work with, everybody seems to have their own theory on this. And if you get the book, each of my team members has included their theory on what it is as well. But that's the theory I'm sticking with at this point until it's proven otherwise to me.
What about intelligence? Do you think it's like sentient like us, or do you think it's like an animal, or any idea there?
Well, that's hard to tell. I mean, it does seem instinctive, but who knows what that means? I mean, there may be some type of higher intelligence. It may be controlled somehow. I just don't know. And because of the sightings and the things that we have gotten from witnesses, it's kind of difficult to make a determination.
Yeah, I figured. But the reason why I ask is because, if it is like an animal and it is interdimensional, maybe it's passing through on accident. Yeah. There have been a lot of speculation that Bigfoot is interdimensional, or even the Loch Ness Monster is traveling through time accidentally through portals. And, so I was just kind of throwing the possibility out there that it's accidentally coming here and going back.
Well, I think most cryptid sightings, those that cannot be proven to be indigenous, are interdimensional beings. There's a lot of connection with Bigfoot sightings as far as UFO activity and other paranormal anomalies. I think when you look at the big picture, a lot of this stuff is tied together.
Yeah, I think so too. Is there any, like with other cryptids, some is nefarious, some is questionable, some is pretty good, but is there any physical evidence that we know of Mothman, or is it all sightings?
No, it's all anecdotal. We've had some indiscernible photographs, because of the fleeting nature of this thing, or it shows up at night, it's hard to get a photograph.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But no, it's just, we just do not have anything but anecdotal evidence.
But a lot of anecdotal evidence, right, to be fair.
Oh, there's a lot of it out there. And it varies, too. I mean, it's not like you're a cookie-cutter explanation or description. even though most of the sightings are very similar, there tends to be some variations. And people who report it stick with what they tell me. And, I've gone back and talked to a lot of these witnesses afterwards, and they just have not changed their story.
So, do you think that there's any sort of correlation or relation between Mothman and the Jersey Devil?
No.
No?
No, I can't really find one. And in fact, the Jersey Devil is kind of hard to take too serious, I believe. I mean, there have been, the sightings of this being that people call the Jersey Devil. They actually really started down in Maryland and Delaware and moved up toward New Jersey and went into the Pine Barrens. Whatever that is, people are seeing, it may be a winged humanoid or a type of winged cryptid. But then again, we've got very little evidence of this thing. And there seems to be more folklore behind it than anything else.
I see. All right, well, we're coming up on the end here, so let's talk a little bit about your blog, phantomsandmonsters.com. You've been running it since, I think you said 2005?
Yeah, I've been doing a daily blog since 2005. It's I've got a free subscription to people who want it in their email. Right now, we've got about 30,000 subscribers, daily subscribers, plus we have the feed. I'm on Facebook, so a lot of the social media is connected to it. And I also do a radio show at Arcane Radio.
And where can they find the radio show?
They can go to paranormalking.com, or they can go to my website at Phantoms and Monsters and click on the Arcane Radio banner, and the podcasts are accessible from there.
And if you would, remind our audience where they can get their hands on your book. Actually, I will do it for you. You can get it at Amazon.com. And the book is called Mothman Dynasty, Chicago's Winged Humanoids. And you got quite a few other books up here as well, Cryptid Encounters, Unexplained Encounters. Really, Lon, it has been a lot of fun talking to you, especially on this topic because, this is something that we really knew nothing about, yet we always talk about it because, I don't know, it's in a world of mystery, it's extra mysterious.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, it's something that's been an enigma to me all these years, but hopefully we're getting closer to getting an explanation.
I agree. All right. Lon, well, thank you very much for being on the show. You've been listening to Lon Strickler here on Radio Wasteland. Don't forget to check out his website, phantomsandmonsters.com, and also check us out on the next show.